Hello and welcome to the That's So Craven podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Fulham. We are back to discuss the 1-1 draw with Everton. As the title of the podcast says, it's a draw that feels like a loss, going down 1-0 to a very late goal from Beto in our final ever appearance at Goodison Park. Here to talk it all through, we have Skibby. How are we going, Skibby?
Yeah, I'm all good. I'm all good. I'm still waiting for the day of like back to where we were about 3 or 4 weeks ago, where I don't have to look at my phone and just see Fulham have done something stupid and go, oh, for God's sake. And it's just a sinking feeling. It's happening too often and I don't like it. But here we are to talk about it.
Yeah, I feel like it might be one of those podcasts today. Dad, how are we going?
Yeah, same.
Oh, well.
Yeah, I it feels like the real expectation setting needs to be inward at the moment. Unfortunately, it's like maybe my hopes are just too high for anything too much better. Also, can we do a whip around for some PR for someone to convince the Saudis or anyone that Sean Dyche is a great manager and just get all these guys out of the Premier League? I hate their football.
Yeah, cool. I don't think he's quite the Saudi style, the exciting football.
Could you imagine that?
Yeah, imagine him handling Neymar, Ronaldo, and
I,
players like
I
that.
did say it would be a PR win of epic
special PR. Yeah, look, it's it's always tough to enjoy when you got Branthwaite and Keane up front at the very end of a game, isn't it? But look, I saw a very interesting tweet, and I think it was Cottage Tactico who shared it on Twitter just before we came on, where Fulham, if you look at expected points this season so far, Fulham are actually second in the table, which is kind of insane. And the fact that we are currently sitting in 10th, mainly down to the fact that we just are unable to close out games at the moment. You look at this game conceding in the 5th minute of injury time. You look at the Man United game conceding late on, the West Ham game conceding in injury time. It's happening all too often at the moment, and we're dropping points because of it. Just off those games, we've dropped 5 points so far, and if you put those 5 points into our league table, I think we're sitting in 5th or 6th. So it feels like we could be having a very different conversation today because we could be sitting chasing European football and really positive, but I mean, we still shouldn't be overly negative with our season so far, but it does feel like we're giving up massive opportunities at the moment, and there's definitely some questions to be answered. Before we jump into it too much further, let's just put out a reminder, as always, for the Discord. Find the link on our Twitter. You'll be able to join the community, chat with like-minded Fulham fans, be able to talk all things Fulham all the time, transfer news in there, analysis, really great people from the community joining into the Discord as well. So please do join up anytime. Let's talk about the game itself. 1-1 against Everton at Goodison Park, a disappointing result at the end of the day. Skibby, going into this game, what were your expectations? Did you feel this was a tough game with no Lukic, no Anderson, or did you feel like this was still an opportunity for us to take points?
Definitely an opportunity to take points. I think we've seen, I think I even said it in the preview, Everton are not a good side. They're where they are in the league due to their performances alone. I don't think they have that kind of star quality to really make something happen. I think the last person who was at Everton who had that was Onana, but he went to Villa and is doing well there. But I think for me, without Anderson and without Lukic, I thought we are still in a position where we can still take the game to them, play how we want to play. I think, there was calls whether we stick with the same midfield because they've got a point to prove, or whether we bring Kearney in or Reed. And can Diop do it? And I think for me it was more, yes, Diop isn't the ball playing defender, but he can still maintain and do a good job against an Everton side who really kind of lack that creativity. So I think there was no surprise to me that it was an unchanged 11 unchanged, unforced 11. Obviously Diop came in for Anderson, he was banned, but I think the midfield had a point to prove because they didn't really have a great game against Villa. Therefore, I think it was a great opportunity for sort of Berger, Pereira, and Smith Rowe to sort of step up and say, you know what, I can do this job. And I think Berger did quite well, if I'm honest. I think he had a bit more confidence about him and it was a bit more assertive and aggressive, which we needed. But I think there's a phrase which we used a lot last season, and I think it might have been an Elton phrase, but it was a fragile Fulham, and we're starting to see it again. There is no one in that sort of on the pitch there who's actually taking the game by the scruff of the neck, making things happen, and I think the only time we actually saw that, and I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but was for the goal, and ESR got hold of the ball, took it to the house, and we scored from it. But apart from that, there was no one really taking the game by the scruff of the neck, and it feels like Jimenez is trying to do it all on his own up front. And I do feel like, yeah, it was 2 points dropped, absolutely, but we should have been way more comfortable than it was. But it's just that fragile mentality, not taking our chances, and it's really starting to hurt us, not just in this game, but for the season going forward.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. And I think it's sort of a wider question, if you will, and I think it's something I want to discuss kind of at length. But is it a case of this Fulham team, and I'll pose this to you, Dad, do you think this Fulham team there's possibly two problems here? We're not clinical enough during the game, and then we're almost nervous finishes, sort of 80th minute onwards. This seems to be a Fulham team that constantly crumbles late on. What do you put that down to?
I've heard the word expectation used twice so far, and I'm starting to think that from a Fulham supporter point of view, it's a really important thing that we all kind of get right, because I just feel like we are not a poor team by any means, but we're just not a great team yet. I'm talking within the context of the Premier League. We've got some star quality about us, and when we put it together, it not only looks good, but it's actually very, very functional, and we can hurt very, very good teams. And we hear a lot about not taking our chances. Is it possible that we're just not good enough in those moments because we just don't have the quality in the key positions where it counts, particularly goal scoring? And that's not to be too harsh on Jimenez. He's doing pretty well at the moment. His individual record is good, but overall as a team, we're not scoring enough goals. We're just not. And I think that just setting aside the late goals that we're letting in at the moment, which is a pretty bad pattern, which we need to shut the door on, and that's a concentration thing. It doesn't look like a fitness thing, but it's a concentration thing, and it's a game management thing that we just seem to switch off and allow teams in. You have to believe that there are ways and means that you can minimize the chances of that happening. But back to your taking opportunities. I know a lot of people, excuse me, a lot of people talk about us not seizing the moment, creating opportunities but not taking them. But I'm starting to believe we're just lacking the quality to do that. I mean, that ball, that opportunity that Smith Rowe had in the box, I know it was a little bit behind him, but he was so far off, hitting the target, it was kind of unacceptable. And again, seems harsh to dump on him because he does have some quality about him. But I just think we probably have to be realistic about the fact that when you have a squad that is not deep, a couple of injuries really exposes you. And I know the injuries are not in attacking parts of the of the lineup, but still, it's overall. I just think we can't compare ourselves to the likes of Villa because we just don't have the quality.
Well, yeah. I mean, you made a point there saying we're not scoring enough goals, but at the same time, we went into the 90th minute with a 1-0 lead. It's not like we're struggling to ever get on the score sheet. I think we might have scored.
But that's not enough goals.
Maybe not enough, but you can't win every game in the Premier League by 2+ goals to nil. Like, we have to have some hard fought games. We have had some hard fought games this season. It's about hanging on at the end of the day because we are putting the ball in the back of the net. I think Man United might be the only game this season where we haven't scored. Is that right? But either way, if you're going into the 90th minute with a lead, you need to be closing these games out. And for me, it's I don't know if it's a defensive issue. Is it a mentality issue? Possibly, because we can't seem to close out games that we really should be closing out, and it's all just due to little lapses in concentration. Skibby, do you feel like this is something that Marco needs to address, or do you think it's down to the players?
It's something that I think both need to address. I think Marco needs to figure out a game plan. I'm not a huge fan of the going 5 at the back, taking off a midfielder and asking to be attacked basically. But that's a game plan which Marco wants to put in place. Therefore, the players need to understand that game plan and execute it better. So I think, for me, for Ashley Young to be so far up the pitch, so free at the back post to hook a ball back in, into a box where we would have arguably 3 central defenders in Cuenca, Diop and Bassi, and none of them to be able to pick up their striker, that says that there's something completely wrong in the way the way that we execute the game plan. The game plan itself, I think, has worked previously, and we talked about a hive mind. We talked about Anderson being the brain and Bassi and Diop being the limbs. You take the brain out of the hive mind, nothing happens, and they basically, speaking in complete metaphorical terms, but the limbs fall over and they don't actually work. So that's what I'm seeing, is that you take the brain out, which is Anderson, the others just don't know what to do, and almost sort of panic, and that's what we saw. So I think we needed someone to step up in that moment and take charge of the defence. I don't think we concede in the last minute in this game with Anderson on the pitch, just because he is able to organise and get everyone on side, where I just didn't see that leadership going into the last sort of few minutes where it was coming. As soon as you took Iwobi off and put Cuenca on, it was just relentless. And I mean, when you think about defensively, who was the person who was pinning Ashley Young back at this game? It was Iwobi. So you had Iwobi in front of Robinson. You take Iwobi off for a central defender, then suddenly, Ashley Young's now free. And then who's going to be picking him up? Therefore, he could just waltz into the box unopposed and hook that ball back in. So I just think it's the execution of the game plan. I think the game plan definitely needs to be revised, but I do think it's on the players that they know what the game plan is going into the last 10 minutes of a game, 1-0 up. They know what's expected of them. It's just asking them to execute it. But then again, it's the same thing when I mentioned. You're asking to be attacked, and when you get overloaded like we did, it is hard to sort of combat that sort of attacking play. But yeah, I definitely think that there's sort of 2 avenues to blame there. I think it definitely rests on the manager as well as the players, but I would say that mostly the players.
I'm going to say that the substitutions, as they were and when they happened, definitely contributed to a weakening of us in those dying minutes. Cuenca, I felt a bit sorry for him. He looked completely at sea. Didn't look like he was up with the speed of the game, which is not an easy thing to do, particularly when other changes have been made, which is going to increase even more pressure on the final line of defence, as Skibby just mentioned. It feels like they weren't great changes.
Well, one thing I was going to say is there's a sort of a knock-on effect here when you've got Anderson out. Usually when we go five at the back, it's Diop who comes in, and he's a combative player who's getting into the right positions, getting in the way, getting his head to the ball. This time around, we had Cuenca come on, who I'd say is probably a more composed ball-playing centre-back, and maybe isn't of the same, well, doesn't have the same thought process and positional senses that Diop seems to have. Because whenever Diop comes off the bench to play in that five at the back, he seems to always be in the right place at the right time. And so it does sort of make sense for him to come into the team and to be subbed on late just to close out a game. Cuenca's probably not that player. I imagine if Tim Ream was still at the club, he would be a perfect person to come on late because he always seems to be in the right position. And I feel like if Tim Ream was playing, he's probably getting his head to that ball or at the back post, nicking the ball away from Ashley Young, or at least putting him under some pressure so he doesn't just have all the time in the world to side foot one comfortably back into the middle. I think there's a big knock-on effect there. And I have to say, throughout the majority of the game, I think the defence actually did quite well. I was, I guess, fairly impressed by the ball-playing ability of Diop and Bassi. I don't think they played too many poor balls. I think we actually played out of defence fairly well for the majority of the game, albeit Everton they weren't pressing us hard, really. They were giving us opportunities to get out of defence, but maybe that's on Sean Dyche not actually putting pressure on us. But we handled it very well, and I think overall we were definitely the better side. But it does come down to being able to close out these games, and it's just something that we just have to get better at. Like you said, it's a good Fulham side, but there's just a few little things that need improving to turn it into a great Fulham side. Let's talk about the goal, Iwobi's goal. Like you mentioned, I think, Skibby, it was the first time we saw Smith Rowe actually take the bull by the horns and take the game by the scruff of the neck and do something. He beats, I think, 5, maybe 6 players, lays it off to Iwobi, who is given acres of space, who puts it in the near post. Skibby, it's what we signed Smith Rowe for, but are we seeing enough of that from him so far this season?
It's almost like you're setting me up here for hating.
I am setting you up.
Would you like me to help you?
Clip it as well.
The answer is no.
I'm going to put my hands up and just say, I love Smith Rowe. I think he's got bags of quality, but he's just got that Brian Ruiz about him where he just goes missing. And I feel like he just tries too hard to make up for any mistakes or not seeing the ball as often as he'd like, that you see him come really deep. And the sense that I got against Everton was, it wasn't going his way. A few touches were getting away from him and it just wasn't working. And you could clearly see that he's a confidence player. And that throughout that first half, he was just guilty of trying to make up for these sort of little errors, but then was causing him to make more errors, which was just not helping the team in that way. And then it seems almost that when we came out for the second half, Marco had been in his ear and just said, mate, just you're a good player. Calm down. It will come. Just play the game as well as you can. Just, don't overthink it. And then for periods of that second half, we started to see the quality of Smith Rowe. He was sort of picking out the passes and then made that absolute mazy run, which, it's almost like he stopped thinking. Like, he wasn't thinking ahead. He was just going to say, right, I'm going to get to the goal and see what happens. And, it wasn't like I know he gets the assist technically. It wasn't like a decisive or defence splitting pass. He just sort of laid it off to Iwobi. Very smart pass. Didn't try and force anything. And Iwobi just had the gap and managed to pick the goal. But I think that's what we want to see more from Smith Rowe is that kind of not getting in his own head. I think that's what he's guilty of. I think we just need to see that the confidence coming through, and I'm hoping that, you know, for him to have what's visibly been a bit of a downer on confidence after a start of the season where he got, I think, a goal and 2 assists, shouldn't really be affected him that much. But, you know, you do see that potentially coming from an Arsenal team to a Fulham team where, you know, it's not always going to be sort of going your way. You've always got to fight for sort of a point or 3 points. So for him to sort of come in, go missing in the Villa game, which clearly has affected him, I think, it's just definitely something which he would need to work on, and comes back to that phrase of fragile Fulham. I think he's sort of added to that. But I do think we've got a great player in Smith Rowe. I do think that the talks of England, I think he did some interviews recently about trying to get back into the England setup, are a bit premature. I know that's the long goal, but I think for him to sort of distance himself from that, just get a season at Fulham under your belt and think about England after that. I mean, realistically, given the sort of the talent pool of England at the moment, you're not going to get in anyway. But focus on Fulham, get your head right, get your mentality right, that you can sort of play a consistent season, and then that's when we'll start to reap the rewards. But I think once he starts thinking about England and, you know, or the fragility of going missing in some games that gets to him, I think that's where he just really needs to improve for me. But don't get me wrong, I do think he's a great player and a great purchase from us, but I'm yet to sort of see the heights that he can reach, and I think that will take time.
I think you make a couple of really good points there, though. That, well, he's been inconsistent, and it does look like a bit of a confidence problem. But given his natural ability and the smarts of Marco Silva, you sort of feel like Marco's absolutely got to get alongside him, arm around the shoulder, and cut him some slack and license here to just try and be that player. And, you know, we need to see 4 or 5 attempts at that kind of play every half, quite frankly, for me. You know, with the loss of Willian, with Harry Wilson not being able to deliver what we need him to deliver. I mean, these are both skillful players who can cut inside and run at defenders, but we don't have that. You know, you've got Nelson. Look at how dangerous he is and how changed we look when he comes on and does that. He's got to be given the license to do that, even at the risk of, you know, losing possession if it doesn't come off. He's got to be given the license and the confidence that if it doesn't work, you know, if you get into the 18-yard box, you never know what's going to happen, particularly if you've got some support. And there's just not enough of that. We tried to sort of, you know, the predictable crosses. We burst down the wings with the predictable cutbacks or crosses, and it's way too predictable at this level. And if you've got a player like Smith Rowe, we've got to use him and really utilise what he could bring to us.
And I think the other part to that is what he brings to the rest of the side as well. When you look at the fact that we're not expecting him to score all our goals this season, but he makes that one run, takes the game on, and that actually leads to us scoring a goal. And it's not him scoring the goal, it's him setting someone up. And I think Iwobi actually gets that opportunity because Smith Rowe continues his run and the defenders are split and they have to, they sort of open that gap up for Iwobi because they're worried about Smith Rowe's run, because all of a sudden they go, geez, this guy's just beat 5 players. We can't leave him alone. And so that's what he brings to the side, more so than just the individual skill that we see occasionally. It's what he brings overall to the way the opposition have to actually adjust their gameplay to us. Another thing that I wanted to talk about, though, which you did sort of briefly bring up, is Reece Nelson, who again came off the bench and looked really, really exciting. With Adama maybe not showing some of the form that we've seen, I guess, before the most recent international break in the last couple of games, do we think it's getting closer to the time for Reece Nelson to finally get a start?
Well, I don't know that that's a one-for-one swap. I mean, It's more about where do you play Iwobi if Reece Nelson is to start. I think Adama's shown enough this year so far to warrant us continuing to actually invest in him. You know, I would have thought I'd like to see us, you know, if we go defensive in that last 10 minutes, for example, how about a couple of big balls over the top and just throw some chaos in there and let Adama run? Because he's, you know, he seems to be fit enough to last 90 minutes and continue to sort of provide those bursts of energy. So it's not like he's cooked after 70 minutes and has to be subbed. But I do think I do think that Reece Nelson can't be denied any further. He's showing it every time he comes on. He has not disappointed any time he's come on, and I think I'd like to see that from the start.
Well, I don't think it's down to Reece Nelson has to play on the left. He's been very effective from the left so far. I'd more be looking at, and again, it doesn't mean that someone gets dropped permanently from the side either. I think there's the option for some decent rotation now where you've got the ability to bring someone like Adama off the bench and give Reece Nelson a start. And maybe because Adama's sort of found his feet a little bit more, he'll be even more impactful late in the game to come off the bench and play the last 20, 30 minutes of a game. Additionally, Iwobi's been in really good form, but he can sort of go in and out of a game. He's the kind of person who I wouldn't mind seeing on the bench because I think he offers a few options. He can play out wide on both sides. He could play up front if you wanted to. He could play in the 8, in the 10. He's a very flexible player and a flexible option to have off the bench. Skibby, your thoughts on Reece Nelson? Is it time?
I think so. I think given what we forget is that he's actually one of the top earners at the club. I think we're actually covering 100% of his wages, which I think is roughly about 100k a week. So, I mean, for that kind of caliber and that kind of expensive player to be sitting on the bench seems quite ludicrous. But I think in terms of performances, I might be a little bit harsh in saying this, but I think that Adama for me is probably more impactful off the bench. I think he had a good start to the season. I think he got a goal and 2 assists, but since then his end product hasn't been perfect. Some of his crossing is woeful. He gets to the byline. It's almost like he's just too quick sometimes for his own good, that he just gets it stuck under his feet and tries to pull out a cross and it just goes off high and wide into the crowd. And I just think, would we be better off having someone potentially more composed, tricky, and someone with a bit more of an end product? I think we would. And I think for me, it would be quite interesting to see Iwobi on to the right with Reece Nelson coming onto the left. And I think with Iwobi coming in, you do potentially lose that kind of pace and that drive on the right-hand side. But what we've seen, and I even saw it against Everton, was, you know, Tete, once he gets the ball at his feet, he's actually quite a mean dribbler. He can take people on, get into spaces. He had a chance. It went high and wide. But, you know, he does allow us to bring that chaos, which, you know, Adama does bring. Obviously, it's not at the same level, but I don't think we'd be too sort of impacted by taking Adama out. But so I think if I wanted to see Reece Nelson come in, which I do, I think it would probably be for Adama just by the recent performances. I think Iwobi gives us a lot more balance. Therefore, it makes sense for, you know, almost like for like, that Reece Nelson is direct. He gets at players. He can sort of take them on more so than Iwobi. So I think that for me, I'd like to see it, but personally, I don't see it happening just yet. I think it would probably take about 3 more games. If we're not getting any end product from the wingers, then he'd start to come in. But he's definitely banging on the door. He's definitely putting in performances off the bench, which I mean, Marco will be pleased with. Yeah, it'd be good to start seeing him in the starting lineup, definitely.
I think you make a good point though. But I think that Dharma last season didn't get a lot of minutes. I think he suffered from lack of confidence. That can't be true now. I think he has performed pretty well, end product notwithstanding, but he has performed pretty well, and I think he knows that he actually has a role and he has some value, and so therefore putting him on the bench, I don't think dents his confidence. I think you could make a story and create a narrative of how he could be more impactful and actually not lose him. So that's probably a good call. It's probably a fair call that you could swap him out.
I think additionally, you could make the argument that Reece Nelson has actually been very impactful off the bench, and him coming on seems to light up a game late on. So maybe Marco's looking at that and going, actually, I'm really happy with what I'm getting off the bench from him. He's probably very happy as well with what Adama offers in terms of tracking back. And I think Iwobi tracks back as well really well. And so maybe it's more about the balance of the overall team and how he wants to play for the first 70 minutes. But that also leads me into another topic, I guess, which you've kind of touched on already, but Marco's substitutions. How are we feeling about those so far this season? Because it's across the last couple of years, it's always been a massive talking point. Does Marco make the subs at the right time, and does he make the right subs? On the weekend, how did we feel about the changes that were made?
Well, I commented that I thought they were unhelpful. I'm not sure I was almost going to say loss, but we didn't lose. But I know it feels like a loss. But conceding that goal could well be down to the change that we made at the time we made them. But let's be fair. Let's be absolutely fair. It's easy to be a manager of a great side and a great squad and have all these incredible chess pieces that have unique properties, and you can have a really balanced bench for all occasions. And then all you've got to do is kind of time their introduction. And I reckon, some of us might do a decent job of doing that if you were Pep and had his resources. But Marco, there's a big step down, after the first couple of subs, that if you actually need to change the game or really shore things up, you're asking people who are not of the same quality of the guy who's blowing a bit hard, and you need to possibly rotate him. It's just very, very difficult to do. So you could have all the strategies in the world, but to actually execute perfectly, you need depth. You need quality in your depth. It doesn't have it.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. Yeah, look, I don't know if we need to dig too much into the goal that we conceded, because it was just poor all round. But look, do you feel like that's something that we can solve, or do you think there's a deeper problem here where we're unable to actually close out these games? Skibby, is it something that we can fix quickly, or is it going to be? Does it require new players to actually be bought in to solidify the end of games?
I think it's just, I don't think players are the problem. I think we've got the quality to be able to see out a game. I think it's just executing a game plan, like I touched upon earlier. I think it's potentially just needing that bit more focus from a defensive side, sort of coaching to sort of say, right, if you're basically, here's your back five, we're going to do a bit of like 6-on-5, defend for 10-15 minutes, and basically just keep pinging balls in and just seeing, if they, and that's the only way you're going to learn, is just because, let's be honest, the way that Everton attacked, the way that any team attacks in the 91st, 92nd minute when they've got their centre half up front with, a big bruiser like Beto, it's basically not choreographed in the slightest. It's a hit and hope ball, so you can't really plan for it, but you just basically need to have players in the right place to be able to defend their zones, and I just don't think that was happening. And I just don't think that does happen, especially that bloody West Ham goal that always haunts my dreams. Because I even said to myself, luckily I didn't say it out loud, but when Danny Ings came on, I said, well, that's what you want when you're chasing a game. Danny Ings coming on, and then bugger me, turns up and scores. But it's just the ball drops at the right time to the right player who knows where the back of the net is. Like Beto for me is one of those players. Danny Ings, one of those players. And I think if you have a good structurally sound defence, then you're able to clear it, you're able to get it out. But in this instance, we had 3 defenders. Apparently none of them picked up the main striker. Granted, there were some other bodies in there which potentially needed a bit more attention, given I think Michael Keane was up there, and he's a bit. I think we even touched upon in the preview, which was his got a shot to goal conversion rate is higher than Haaland's, which is ridiculous. But so maybe he was a threat. But I do feel like it is something that can be coached into these 2 players. They are Premier League players. They're not lower end of the table Premier League players. I do firmly believe they are mid-table to higher mid-table and should be able to see out a result against an Everton side such as this. But it's just going to be that mentality, and you just need that person to take control, which I didn't see. Anderson, for me, if he's in that situation as the 5, he organises them and tells them where to be. You'd like to think that Leno would have a bit of a say, but, the ball's pinging around so quickly that, there needs to be someone on that back line to take control, which I just don't think exists without Anderson being in the side.
Yeah, I don't think you can underestimate the effect of Anderson being missing. I know one man is not a team, but he's pretty important in terms of his organisation. And I think I'm the last man who's going to call for shithousery and, overt game management, because I don't enjoy it, and I don't want to see us running the ball into the corner flag from the 85th minute on. But like you say, if your centre halves hanging around in the box, everyone in the stadium knows what's going on, and you've got to be onto that and act accordingly. And if that means you hoof it down the ground into no man's land with not even a Dharma down there, fine, be doing that. But it just seems like we from time to time lack kind of the smarts, just the savviness to sort of slow the game down, control the game. This is Everton. It's bloody Everton. They're not Real Madrid. And just because you've got a bunch of big guys, crowding the box and trying to get on the end of one, it doesn't. We should be able to be better than that.
Yeah, look, I'd agree with that. And look, I'll pull out a question that we received on the Discord today. Your Marco Silva, you've just been told you can buy one player for 25 million in January. Which position or who are you looking to buy? Skibby, I'll go to you first. Unless Dad's got one already, because Skibby looks like he's thinking. Dad, I'll throw to you first then. Give us a position at least, or a player.
Skibby, I'm gonna buy you some time to come up with a really good one, and I'll just chuck in an average one. So don't let me down, okay? So I'm not going to say who I'm going to buy, but I'm going to buy a exciting, probably not Premier League proven, but an exciting, high quality, non-Premier League number 8.
Yeah, okay. So someone to replace Andreas Pereira effectively.
Yep. Release Andreas Pereira from the hell he puts us through, together with his mate Marco every week, and just acknowledge the fact that it isn't working, and do a proper job in the 8.
Well, I don't mind that as well, because I think if you had someone like Pereira to be able to bring off the bench late in games, I think that's actually it adds to the squad depth massively, because he's got someone who can play in the 8, you've got someone who could play in the 10, has the ability to put in dangerous balls late in the game and play good passes. So I think that's a good pickup. Skibby, you've had time now. This is better be brilliant.
I was going to say it's going to be a cop out, but a bit more of a detailed cop out. I think after the last game for Everton, I remember watching Yuri Tielemans and thinking, this is what we need. We need someone who is basically Pereira, but just takes us to the next level. And Yuri Tielemans is one of those players who is just absolutely mustard because he's just everywhere on the pitch. He'll pick out an absolute peach of a pass. However, I do feel like he's out of the 25 million price range because I think Villa paid about 40 million for him. Yeah. But I'm trying to think of a similar character, which it isn't coming to me, but that's who we definitely need, I think, is that Pereira 2.0 can basically dictate a game and just doesn't panic on the ball and looks after the ball, and it's just that intricate. I mean, if I'm honest, I would probably, for 20 million, I would probably take Ward-Prowse.
Yeah.
If that's an option, but it might be a bit on the cheap side. We may need TK to do a bit of his wheeler dealing to get him down to 20-25 mil, but I think his work rate off the ball, he's like a little bee, just in your face, just always around the ball. But obviously it has those, if he could pick a ball up deep, can drop a ball in, I think he would be a very good fit for our sort of number 8 next to Berger/Lukic. So I'd probably say Ward-Prowse if he was available.
I agree with both of you that I think the 8 is a position where we need to strengthen. But the person that I would pick, and I just had a quick check on Transfermarkt to see what his rough market value is, and it fits inside the 25 million. Dwight McNeil, who we saw on the weekend, who you scoff at me, but every time he picks up the ball, he runs, and it reminds me of Willian in a way. I just like the way he attacks when he's got the ball at his feet, and I see him playing in the similar way to Smith Rowe. I think he could play in the 10. He could probably manipulate him into the 8 as well, potentially. But he'd definitely add to our depth on the wings, and you could all of a sudden have Iwobi, Reece Nelson, Dwight McNeil, Harry Wilson, Adama, all giving you options off the wings, and you could see a lot more rotation week in, week out. He's someone who I've liked for a while. Skippy, why don't you like Dwight McNeil? What's wrong with him?
Oh, I just don't like Dwight McNeil.
Is it just because he plays for Everton?
It's not because he plays for Everton. It's just
Go on.
He looks good in a really crap side. That's my opinion of him. I just don't think he's... Is he better than the midfielders that we have? I don't think so. I don't think in a front three of, Iwobi, Adama/Nelson, Smith Rowe, does he get in that side? Not for me. I just think he's it's the cheerleader effect, if you're aware what that is.
Yeah. No, fair.
So I won't go into that, but it's the cheerleader effect. He's just
How I Met Your Mother reference there. Good.
There you go.
Or speaking on the Everton theme, another person, someone like Calvert-Lewin, who is a proven goal scorer and hustles and bustles up front and has, I think he's 70 or 80 Premier League goals to his name across a handful of seasons. I'd like someone like that who can kind of guarantee you 12 plus goals every season up front. Go on, Dad.
Yeah, I'm actually going to revise my answer and say no. I want more than 20. I don't think 20 is going to actually solve our problem. It might actually just introduce another one into the mix. We'll end up with another 8. Is he an 8? Is he a 10? Why isn't Pereira working? Why isn't Smith Rowe working? It just spend 40 million pounds and buy a Yuri Tielemans or someone similar.
Well, what I think is realistically going to happen, which there's, if you're part of the Fulham Discord, you'll see there's fairly regular links at the moment to players. And I think it looks like we're probably going to dip into South America. And I feel like we're going to be signing a player and not spending more than sort of 12 million maybe, but bringing in someone who's not got the Premier League experience, but in a similar sort of way to how we were looking at Andre, someone who has potential, might be a bit raw in a similar style to Muniz, but as has been shown, if we scout the right player and bring someone in the stead of Muniz, who might not be ready straight away, but has the potential to be like a John Duran or a Muniz or an Andre who can come in and actually make an impact straight away. I'd actually, if we're only going to spend 20 million, and I don't think, statistically clubs don't spend a huge amount of money in January, so realistically we're not going to be spending 40. I'd rather us take a bit of a chance on some South American uncut gems, if you will, and see if we can turn one of them into a diamond. But look, it's an interesting thing, and it's something I'm sure we're going to start thinking about soon as we move closer to November now. The transfer window is 8 weeks away effectively, so definitely a reason to join the Fulham Discord, because you'll see all the transfer news as it comes through live. Guys, let's have a very quick look at the stats from the game. Fulham 60% possession, 588 passes to Everton's 383 passes. 14 shots on goal for Fulham with just 3 on target. 10 shots from Everton with 5 on target for them. Only 2 corners for Fulham for the game, which seems very low. And both teams with 8 fouls. Again, it's a game that I think if you eyeball it first up, Fulham did dominate and we were the better side. But again, it's really what happens on the score sheet at the end of the game and not the statistics behind it. So a disappointing loss. Quick look at the table. Fulham still sitting 10th place.
We didn't lose, by the way.
I know. That's the terrible thing. It feels like a loss, even though it wasn't a loss, because we really should have won that game. But yeah, look, sitting in 10th in the table currently with 12 points. Still, again, only 1 point from 8th at the moment. A good win and a couple of good results in the bag see us move back into those European qualification spots. There's a bit of breathing room down the bottom, let's be honest. Palace, Ipswich, Wolves and Southampton really struggling this season in the bottom 4. Fulham have 12 points. Palace have just the 6 points so far this season in 17th. So we do have a bit of breathing room early doors, which is always good to see. A final note before we do wrap this one up as well. Well done to Fulham women's team who won 1-0 against Dorking Wanderers on Sunday. That keeps them unbeaten in the league so far this season. 6 games, 6 wins, a goal difference of 27. Still, unfortunately, sitting in 3rd place because Saltdean sitting on top of the table have 7 wins from 7 games. Fulham do play Saltdean at Craven Cottage in November, so please do get down to support the girls. It's going to be a massive game, and good to see Fulham actually putting them on Craven Cottage more often this season, and even better seeing them actually pick the big games where Fulham need to get wins and putting them at the Cottage, because it does make a huge difference when, if you look at the Motspur Park attendances of maybe scratching 100 each week, and you look at how many we managed to get down to the Cottage for those games where you got over 1,000 people there, that has to make a huge difference and be intimidating for any opposition side. So well done for Fulham for actually actioning that and getting them on the Cottage.
That
guys,
also reminds me of something.
Go on, Skibby.
Match-worn shirt, our match-worn partner, you can actually get your hands on a Fulham women's shirt, which is ultra rare because they don't even sell them, but all in aid of a good cause. So if you want to fancy getting yourself an AEW Fulham shirt, like myself, you can buy a match issue from the shirt, I believe, against Dorking Wanderers. So, yeah, bear that in mind. I'm keeping an eye on a couple.
6 days remaining on those as well. It's matchwornShirt.com/FulhamW. You can find the shirts there. So
I think the men's is also up, but that's boring, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
I mean, it's still for a great cause, but we want the AEW shirts, don't we?
100%. And look, there's how many shirts up there at the moment? 15 shirts 15. Available. So
yeah.
A good opportunity to get yourself a Fulham women's shirt. And like you said, not many, there are no Fulham shirts with AEW as a sponsor, so it's a good opportunity to get an impressive little piece to hang on your wall.
I mean, it'd be quite a rare shirt, wouldn't it, on its own?
I think it'd be an incredibly rare shirt, match worn and AEW as a sponsor as well. Love that. Yeah, good call, Skibby. Do check that out so you can get yourself a match-worn Fulham women's shirt. Hanging on your wall behind you, Skibby. I need to improve the
Yeah,
region behind me as well. So
that's it. And I guess anyone on the Discord, any ideas of what you want to see behind me, I'll take requests.
dangerous.
Clean ones.
Yeah, you know that's not going to happen. Guys, thank you very much for talking this one through. It's not the most exciting one to talk about, unfortunately, but hopefully things turn around for us soon. And when we preview the game coming up later on this week, hopefully we'll be a little bit more positive, and maybe Fulham can get themselves back on track. The next game we have is on Tuesday night, so a bit of a break for the team. Sorry, Monday night against Brentford at the
Monday.
Cottage. Yep, sorry, I'm looking at the wrong time zone there. Monday night at the Cottage against Brentford. A big game for Fulham. Brentford, who have had some good results in recent times, despite having to fight back and not scoring in the first minute for once. It's going to be a big game for Fulham, so fingers crossed we get a result there. But looking forward to talking that one through later this week. Skibby, thank you very much for joining us.
No, thank you very much for having me, and hopefully, I'll tell you what. If it's like this against Brentford, I don't think I'll come on, to be honest.
I won't hold you to that because we might need your help, but we'll see. Dad, thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. And I hope you both benefited in a cheerleader effect, kind of away from my appearance here tonight. And
Dad, tell me, did you just Google that? Because I know you haven't watched How I Met Your Mother.
How do you know?
Because I know.
Well, you'll never know.
It's the benefit of being your son is that I definitely know. You definitely Googled it, but
you
good,
learned
good
something,
job.
so I like
You
it.
learned
I like
something.
I like the reference. That was good.
Very good. Thank you very much. Thank you to everyone, as always, who continues to support and downloads the podcast. Thank you to all our Discord members as well. We really appreciate the community we're building there. And as always, come on, you Whites.